The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory be to you, O Lord.
Some Pharisees approached Jesus, and to test him, they said, "Is it against the law for a man to divorce his wife on any pretext whatsoever?" He answered, "Have you not read that the Creator from the beginning made them male and female, and that he said, 'This is why a man must leave father and mother and cling to his wife, and the two become one body. They are no longer two, therefore, but one body. So then, what God has united, man must not divide." They said to him, "Then why did Moses command that a writ of dismissal should be given in cases of divorce?" "It was because you were so unteachable," he said, "that Moses allowed you to divorce your wives. But it was not like this from the beginning. Now I say this to you. The man who divorces his wife, and I'm not speaking of fornication, and marries another, is guilty of adultery." The disciples said to him, "If that is how things are between husband and wife, it is advisable not to marry." But he replied, "It is not everyone who can accept what I have said, but only those to whom it is granted. There are eunuchs born that way from their mother's womb. There are eunuchs made so by men, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves that way for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let anyone accept this who can." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Please open your Bibles. We are in Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 to 12. Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 to 12. So, as of yesterday, we finished the fourth of the 5 discourses of Jesus. We finished the community discourse. Jesus has finished talking about community ethics. That is now done and dusted. And Jesus leaves his headquarters in Galilee. Remember, he had practically made Galilee and Capernaum his headquarters. And now he starts moving southwards to Judah. This incident in today's gospel takes place several months before Jesus is actually put to death. But in a way, Jesus has begun to move towards Jerusalem and towards accepting and embracing his cross for you and me. Now, having already set in motion the plot to kill Jesus, we are told that the Pharisees now come to him, and they are trying to stack up evidence to use against him. You'd remember some time ago, they encountered him on the far side of the Jordan, in what I explained was the Decapolis. They had actually come there to trap him, or rather they came to meet him, and Jesus literally overturned the tables, and he offends them to the point where, if you remember, the disciples say, "Why did you offend the Pharisees? You know, they are important people." So we are told today that they have come to test him. Yeah, this is the stacking up of evidence against a person, against Jesus. And make no mistake, they are not testing his knowledge. Yeah, they are trying to find something that they can use against him, and to create a wedge between this growing crowd of people who are completely enamored by Jesus. You know, this is a very, it's an age-old ploy that people use when they want to, they divide a country. Yeah, to give you an example, they divide a parish, they divide a council. You bring in an element there which automatically divides people, and you'll notice that many people who try to draw a wedge will ask a public figure this question, and watch, they'll say, so and so is the question, yes or no, give us the answer. The minute you have somebody doing this to you, you know this person is a crook. Yeah? Because no answer is so clear. Not all answers are clear where you can say yes or no. There are several circumstances. So what's so deadly about this contentious question? Because now they've come with literally a yes or no question. Now the question that is thrown at Jesus, and watch this, is about the legality. Can one legally divorce their wife for any reason? It's about divorce. They have come about divorce. Can somebody legally divorce their wife on any grounds? Now, really, this was a catch-22 situation. You were damned if you answered it, and you were damned if you didn't answer it. You were going to get caught anyway, and I'm going to explain to you why. Because really, this question of divorce at the time of Jesus had split the Jewish community right down the center. And the reason behind this was there were two schools of thought at the time of Jesus, two rabbinical schools of thought. The first, there was one which was called the Hillel, the school of Hillel. So these were Jewish leaders, and therefore they had a very large following, Jewish rabbis with a large following, Hillel. And the other was a group called Shammai. So the school of Hillel and the school of Shammai. Now the school of Hillel held that you could divorce a person on any flimsical grounds, anything would do. I'm going to, one could have been, and this is true, I'm not making it up. One was, your cooking is bad, so I divorce you. I can see a lot of husbands and wives are smiling, but anyway. The other one was, oh, you've not covered your head, yeah, with a veil, I divorce you. And then, of course, there was the age-old problem that always takes place with in-laws. You can't get along with my mother-in-law, I decide to divorce you. So this was the school of Hillel. Anything goes with regard to divorce. Now, there was another school, as I said. It was the school of Shammai. And the school of Shammai held that one could not divorce another person unless in the case of impurity or in the case of adultery. So this was the stricter version, whereas the school of Hillel was a very flippant kind of anything would do version. Now, we have no idea that the Pharisee who brought this question to Jesus, which school did he come from? But we certainly know this much, that Jesus, by saying yes to one school and no to the other, would appear to be taking sides and therefore would split down his hearers in right down the middle, and this was not good. Now, Jesus was not here to take sides. What was he there? He was there to back the truth. And this is very important because, as I said to you, I don't know whether I said this, sometimes I forget who I'm talking to these days, so many people. I said very often, I think I said this to you all the other day, very often when couples come to you for counseling, they want you to take sides. They're not interested in the truth. And this is my problem. This is the reason why I stopped helping couples, because I said, look, you are not here to see, what is the truth and let's move forward. You are here to make your case that I am right and you are wrong, and it doesn't work. Now, how does Jesus answer the Pharisees? My congregation in Maladis knows this. I say, you ask Jesus a stupid question and they'll give you the answer. They'll say, Jesus gives you a stupid answer. Yeah, for every stupid question, you deserve a stupid answer. Let me give you a classic stupid question. Jesus, do you love me? It's a classic stupid question. I always say, if he didn't love you, why would he die on the cross for you? I understand where it comes from, but in a very lighter sense, don't ask Jesus silly questions. I think you know how much he loves you. So they asked him what was definitely a silly question, because they were out to trap him, not because they wanted to learn. So Jesus passes a very snide remark. He gives it to them good and proper. And what does Jesus say to him? He says, well, you guys are the Pharisees. If anybody should know the answer, it's you chaps. Yeah, what does your scripture say? How come you don't know your own scripture? That's what Jesus was really saying to them. You should know the answer, so why come to me? You see, Jesus had actually caught them because he knew what they were up to. So what does Jesus do? He still takes the discussion to where it ought to begin. He goes to the beginning. He takes us to the Garden of Eden. He takes a step back in time, even though you will find references to this matter of divorce and marriage in Deuteronomy chapter 24. Jesus doesn't go to Deuteronomy chapter 24. Deuteronomy is part of what the Jews call the Torah, what we call the Pentateuch, the books. I will teach you this when we are doing Genesis, which are traditionally called the books written by Moses. So they want to go back to Deuteronomy 24, and Jesus says no. He says, let's go to the beginning. Let's go to God. Because he says, let's look at the larger picture. And let's look and see what God ordained. Because marriage is not our idea. Marriage is God's idea. That's the point Jesus is trying to make. So if marriage is God's idea, then only God can alter it, adapt it, amend it, negate it, or whatever else. We human beings have no business touching what God has very clearly ruled on. So Jesus says, let's go to the Garden of Eden. You want an answer? Let's not go to human traditions. And remember, I've told you this, that by the time of Jesus, the Pharisees had filled the laws with human tradition. I spoke to you of the various commentaries that they had only on the Mishnah, the Talmud, on the Torah, the Mishnah and the Talmud were commentaries. I was reading the other day some of the things that they wrote about Jesus in the Mishnah and the Talmud. You'll be shocked. Yeah, you can see how much of hate they had, and so the commentaries itself speak of Jesus and his mother very disparagingly. But remember, these are commentaries. Yeah, this is not the original text. So Jesus says, let's go to Deuteronomy. He says, let's go to Genesis, and there we will find what God really says. Now, what is Jesus really doing? He's doing some serious course correction, as we ought to do. You know, we have now, we very liberally make a lot of exemptions for ourselves when it comes to the matter of marriage. So, they have brought to Jesus and now listen to this. They have brought to Jesus the matter regarding divorce. Jesus says, that's not the point. He says the real issue is not divorce. The real issue lies with the understanding of marriage. Therefore, he says, let's go to the beginning. Are you seeing what Jesus is doing? This is the course correction he's making. He says, you are discussing divorce. You should not be discussing divorce. Let's go first to what God planned, and that is marriage. Yeah, your discussions of divorce come much later after the issue of, these are human understandings and human issues. So he says, let's visit the first marriage. Now, really, this should have already settled the matter between Jesus and the Pharisees. Why? Because he's already given them a bloody nose when he told them, you chaps should know the scriptures, you are misquoting the scriptures. They should have beaten a hasty retreat. But there are some people who are, as we say, suckers for another good round of beating, and I think the Pharisees were one of them. They didn't want to give up the match. So they thought they had a few more punches against Jesus, they could have got it. So what did the Pharisees do? Now watch. They brought out their big gun. Who's their big gun? They brought out Moses. Yeah? Now if you listen to the flow, it's beautiful, because Jesus has told them, look, this is not the way God wanted it. Go back to what God thought. So now what do? They sneak in Moses and they say, okay, if you're saying this, then why did Moses say that you could give a writ of dismissal? Have you followed? They bring in Moses. Why did Moses say this? Why did Moses permit us to divorce? Now, for Jesus, this didn't pose a challenge, this question, because he sees very clearly that the Pharisees have missed out a very, very crucial point, and herein lies the answer. Moses had given them a concession. Moses had not changed the commandment. This was a concession. They now looked at a concession as a commandment. Do you get the point? They looked at a concession. This is like an exemption. Okay, in this case, we exempt you. They have taken the exemption and are now making the exemption as the commandment. No. An exemption is an exemption. You can't use an exemption to become the new rule. So Moses had never overturned the fundamental commandment of God, and God had never changed his fundamental commandment of marriage. God was very clear. This was his idea, that A man should be joined to his wife and nothing should come between them. So perhaps the thoughts in our mind run like the disciples in verse 10 that we heard, because you must be saying, oh my goodness, now we are trapped, because once I get married and if the marriage is not working, am I allowed a divorce? Now I'm trapped. And the disciples actually come to Jesus and they say, Lord, if that is the case, it's so difficult, it is better not to marry. You heard what they said today, it's better not to marry. They speak, the disciples speak like we speak from our human experiences of the difficulties that we face in marriage. So the question now we have to ask ourselves is literally, therefore, does marriage make any sense at all? Let's understand the point that is being made. The problem is very often that marriage is looked at as a social obligation. I don't know whether you realize this. It is not looked at as a vocation. It's looked at as a social obligation. So let me give an example. Now, please remember that examples are odious. Otherwise, some people who don't understand examples start applying examples very personally to themselves, and I don't know what all goes on in many people's mind. But please remember, an example is an example, yeah? Whatever the example is worth, it's not meant to be personal. But I remember a lady once coming to me and she said, I'm sure she didn't mean it the way she said it, but she said it something like this. She said, you know, Father, please tell my son to get married now. He's not getting married. He's almost 33 years old. Please tell him to get married. So I said, why do you want him to get married? He must be quite happy being alone. She said, no, I need somebody to help me in the house. I said, well, in that case, you don't need a daughter-in-law, you need a domestic help. Yeah, unless, of course, you think that your daughter-in-law is supposed to be some kind of domestic help. See, we're looking at marriage as a social obligation. What will people say? Are you're not married, you're 35 years, is something wrong with you? You know, this something wrong with you is a very, very interesting question. I remember Father Larry Pereira telling me, if a young, handsome boy decided to become a priest, they would say, is something wrong with him? Yeah, because he's young and handsome, therefore he should have got married. It's like all the ugly chaps and the brainless fellows went to the seminary. You know, these kind of social talk that we have is very dangerous. Yeah? So we make it sound that everybody is forced to get married, and we are pushing people. I am also culpable of this. I have very often, very sadly, just looked at somebody, when are you getting married? And the worst part is, as soon as you get married, the next question is, when are you having children? The pressure we put on people. I am now slowly learning how not to say the wrong things to people, because we don't know what's going on in somebody's life. And let them be. So we think that we have to fit into this mold and push everybody to get married. It's a social requirement. It's not a social requirement. You see, marriage requires a lot of discernment, and I'm convinced that we don't do this. It's not for everybody. Marriage is not for everybody. Yes, God will that man and woman should live together, but we have enough of cases even in the Old Testament and in the New Testament of people who are not married. Yeah, there are all our saints, many of them not married. So it's not for everybody. So we might think to ourselves that Jesus could have backed off a little. No, come on, Jesus, don't make our life so hard. Give us a little adjustment here and there to this. Look at our human frailty and give us some adjustment. For Jesus, the heart of the discussion really is not divorce. It is about marriage. Can you fix your marriage? God did not think of divorce. Do you realize this? He only thought of marriage. Who thought of divorce? Mankind thought of it. Humankind thought of it. God never had divorce in his plan. I forget the word that fails me, but now we have these, before marriage, there are these agreements that we make. If we get married, it's called something, I forget what it is, but I'm sure you got the word. But if we get married, then you get this and I get this. And this is done before the marriage. What is it saying? It is already saying that, look, we are heading towards a divorce, or there could be a divorce, so we made a provision. So it's like having a blueprint for marriage and saying, I have made a backdoor exit. So just in case, sweetheart, I love you, but just in case, from the kitchen I can escape. See, that's human folly. God made a blueprint with 32 feet high walls on all sides for the house so that you are there forever. He never made a blueprint with an exit plan. So give marriage the time that it requires. And I accept. I know some of you are saying, especially those of you who are struggling with your marriage, are saying, okay, Father, it's time for you to shut up. You're not married. I am. I'm married to a whole parish. Yeah? And though I may not share a bedroom with the whole parish, I share my life with them. And that's equally challenging. All of marriage is not about sex. Yeah? Marriage is about living relationships, and it's tough. I always tell people, you can't handle a family of 5. I have to handle a family of 250 families. And God bless the parish priest of Orlem. He's got I don't know how many more families there. We are married. Don't glibly say silly things to priests. We understand the weight of a relationship. We live that relationship. And our life is not better than yours, because marriage and priestly vocation both are sacrifices. Never say to a priest, oh Father, you've sacrificed. I say to you, oh my dear Mr. and Mrs. John, you have also sacrificed. It's a sacrifice on both sides. But think about this. And that's why I'm a little anti this social pressure to get married. Yeah, leave people alone. It takes a priest 8 years to discern his vocation. Look, the time that we spend in the seminary is not meant to study. Sometimes when you finish 4 years, they say, oh Father, have you come to the offertory, how to say Mass? They don't teach you how to say Mass in the seminary. That's for the last year and maybe a couple of classes. It's really a process of discernment. Yeah, the seminary, when you join, is not to become a priest, is to discern whether you should be a priest. Yeah? So allow people to come back from the seminary. There is no social shame. But we go for 8 years to discern, do we really fit into this? Think of marriage. How much of discernment goes on? There's a lot of courtship. I don't know whether there's discernment in courtship, but good luck to you if there is. The real discernment process sometimes is a 2-day program that you're forced to go. It's called a marriage preparation course. Weigh the two together. There's a lot of discernment, and still we get it wrong. Yeah? And still we get it wrong. Marriage requires a lot of discernment. Now, I know you'd like me to talk extensively on marriage because it affects a lot of you. But here's what I want to say, and I say this from my heart. I also understand those who struggle in difficult marriages. And I want to say this very clearly. I cannot, in my heart, reconcile with an abusive marriage. I cannot. So the church doesn't have the concept of divorce. The church will never grant you a divorce. There is, I remember Cardinal Ozzy, when he was my professor teaching me, saying, there is one strange clause for divorce. It exists. I remember him teaching us this, but it's so rare that it's in the rarest of the rare cases. You've never heard of it. What the church really does is grant us an annulment. And let me explain to you very briefly what an annulment is. It's simply this, that at the time of getting married, something that was essential to marriage was missing and was hidden and was absent. It must be at the time of marriage. Let me give you one example. Supposing a person is insane, yeah? He's suffering from tremendous depression, not insane, sorry, I used the wrong word. Suffering from tremendous depression, has a lot of mental issues, and this was hidden from the other party. That man is not capable of marriage. Now you get the point? At the time of marriage, he was not capable. Let me give you another example. Supposing a man or a woman is not able to bear children, and they have hidden this. They have hidden this from one another. What is essential to marriage? Also procreation. You have hidden this. Supposing they have agreed, they said, okay, we accept, but you've hidden it. That's another case. So there are several clauses here. When the church grants an annulment, they always go back to the time of your marriage to see, was there something there that should have been there in you that was not there, which was essential to marriage. So I'm just going very briefly so that you're not confused. Therefore, why are we going against the law of Christ? We are not going against the law of Christ. Yeah? There are certain conditions for any marriage to be valid and illicit. One last thought. I'm way over the time. Today is the feast of St. Maximilian Kolbe, and he's one of my favorites of the modern saints. He was that great saint who, in the Second World War, was incarcerated in Auschwitz in the concentration camp, and he gave his life for another prisoner who was going to be shot and to be starved, and he took his place. And finally, Maximilian Kolbe was they starved him to death, and finally, because he didn't die, I think it was carbonic acid, if I'm not mistaken, that they injected into him so that he died. I was very privileged some years ago to go to Poland for 5 days with 2 or 3 friends, and we went to Częstochowa, we went to the birthplace of St. John Paul II, to the Shrine of the Divine Mercy, and we went to Auschwitz. And one of the most moving narrations I read about his life on that day in preparation for that trip was when he was a little boy. You know, I think he was up to no good, some mischief in the house, and his mother got very angry with him, and she said to him, she said, "Maximilian, what am I going to do with you? What is to happen to you?" She said, "You know, if you keep behaving like this." And he was a very sensitive child. He ran all the way to the church, went to our Blessed Mother. He had a great love for her. That's why in the opening prayer, it talks about his burning love for the Immaculate Virgin Mary. And he went and he wept before her. And he said, "What is to happen to me?" My mother says, "What's going to happen to me?" And Our Lady appeared to him. And she offered him 2 crowns, a red crown and a white crown. The red was for martyrdom and the white was for purity. And she said to him, "Choose any one." You know what he did? He said, "I'll take both." He became a priest, and he also gave his life for his brother. Marriage is about dying very often to yourself in order for the other. I pray for you today, especially those of you who are struggling with your marriages. I know it's not easy, but I want to pray for you. And tonight, before I go to bed, for all of you who are listening, God bless you.